It's our privilege today to bring to you some speakers in our first session from Community Resource Unit, or CRU, as we like to call it. I'll just give you a little bit of information about their background and I'll hand it straight over to them. We have Lindy and Ainsley. They both work at CRU and they're in the Families for Inclusive Education project. There's some amazing resources from this project back up in the main room, I believe, that are free, so please do help yourself before you leave today. Lindy's an occupational therapist and a mother of 4, including a teenager with a disability. And Ainsley has over 20 years' experience as a primary school teacher, education advisor and specialist teacher. So lots of great wisdom in the room this morning. For those of you joining us online, please do pose your questions as we go. There is a slight delay in when we receive them, and we will probably hold questions over to the end just to not interrupt the conversation, but please do pop those questions in. And for those of you in the room, at the end there'll be that opportunity as well. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm just going to maybe lift that a little bit, my height.
I'll put it in my height.
Yes, so as mentioned, we work for the Community Resource Unit, and I might change the slide over. And of course the topic today is all around adjustments and what is reasonable. So first of all, a little bit more about Lindy and I. As mentioned, we're both professionals and parents. I have a teaching background and Lindy in occupational therapy, but we're very much parents who are right there in the system with our children at the moment. I have 2 children with disability. Lindy has 4 children and she has a now 17-year-old daughter that brings her to this day and to her work with CRU. So CRU has been around for about 30 years. They came about as institutions closed around Queensland, and community got together to work out better and new ways ahead for people with disability to make sure that they are truly connected and part of their communities. So these are our mission and our aims at CRU that we are always working towards and we keep front of mind. So what are you in for today? We're hoping you're going to walk away today with so many new ideas and tips to help you advocate and be right there for your children as they work through their years at school. So we're going to talk about leading with vision, gifts and contributions, reasonable adjustments, helping you get your heads around the language and what all that means, what is reasonable to expect, inclusive adjustments, examples and stories, some advocacy tips. We want to make sure we leave you with those before you leave today, and some good resources to go to for further information. We could really probably make this a whole day workshop, so it's going to be a little bit speedy, but it will hopefully give you a good overview so that you can come back to CRU or come back to the resources that we recommend along the way. So I'm going to begin with a bit of a description of a 15-year-old girl. So this 15-year-old girl has Down syndrome. She's ASD level 2. She experiences anxiety. She has scoliosis and requires a brace 23 hours a day. She experiences physical fatigue. She can't walk long distances or stand for any length of time. She has low tone in her mouth, and that affects her speech clarity. She has auditory sensory modulation disorder, is extremely defensive to noise created by speakers of crowds. She has an intellectual impairment which impacts almost all areas of her academic day, has auditory processing and working memory difficulties. She's been seeing a psychologist for significant anxiety issues for 5 years now. She was selectively mute for 4 years due to anxiety. She needs frequent breaks during class time to self-regulate and get back to calm.
Now, this is a description of another child. She's an artist, a piano player. She attends the local yoga studio twice a week. In the past, she's been a member of the high school tennis club, the running club and the volleyball team. Her interests are in technology, in science and geography. She is an introvert, but she engages well in pairs and groups. She's a good team member. She's also a really loyal friend. She has excellent long-term memory for visual information, and she really hopes to find a job in website design or robotics or some sort of aspect of science. So we're going to do a little bit of a workshop activity first, thinking about how easy do you think it would have been to include the first child in school, in a classroom. So the child that Ainsley has described, how easy do you think that child is to include?
If you're only provided with that description of the child.
Difficult? And if you were going to try and get a crystal ball and look down 5 years down the track for this child, how would you see their employment options? Limited employment. How would you see their social circle, their friendships? Limited as well, limited friendships, limited social opportunities. How would you see this child's living options if they're moving out of home in 5 years? Not likely? What did you say? Probably a home, like at home? Yeah? Any other ideas? Yep. Yep. But some sort of, like a group home or supported residence, right? So what about the child that I described? How easy do you think they would be to include in a classroom? Easy. And in 5 years' time, how do you see their options for employment? What opportunities do you think they'd be able to explore? Many options. A world of options. What about social life, friendships? A big network, great network of friends. Yep, lots of different, a big social life. And if they wanted to move out at 20, how do you see that happening? Sorry? Their choice. They just move out. Yep, quite independently, where they want to go. Now, you've probably already cottoned on that this is actually the same child. This is my daughter, and all of that we said is true. So it's all about the information that we share with the people in the school and the other people in control of our children. So one description leads to low expectations, limited opportunities, and negative perceptions. The other description leads to high expectations, the same opportunities as everybody else, and a valued perception. And that is something that we can control as parents. So some stories enhance life, others degrade it. So we must be careful about the stories we tell, about the ways we define ourselves and other people. And when it comes to our children, we do need to be very careful about what we say and how we describe them. I have 4 children. One of them has Down syndrome, and I'm very careful to only talk about her in the way that I would talk about my other children. It wasn't always that way. I am an OT and my husband's a doctor, so I've got all the labels and the deficits and the diagnoses down to the finest, minutest thing down pat. And so I could, ramble off a very large list. And more of my story is actually recorded by crew and up on the website at that link, if you would like to sort of see how I realised that was not doing her a good service and how I sort of changed the way I spoke and the positive outcomes that that's had on Millie's life. So now I'm going to hand back to the teacher to tell you more about the definition of reasonable adjustments.
So as a parent, we don't expect you to know all the reasonable adjustments inside and out, but it is important that you've got a bit of a handle on them and you know what is reasonable and what can be done. And there are great fact sheets now available through most of the Disability Standards for Education, the NCCD, that are parent friendly. So I highly recommend that you have a look at those. We're going to go through some of the main ones that would be helpful for parents today. So, an adjustment is a measure or action taken to assist a student with disability to participate in education and training on the same basis as other students. So that language of same basis is really key when you're coming along to parent interviews or meetings with school. So it's good to use some of that language that's embedded in the standards and in the NCCD as well. Adjustments can be made across the whole school, so it's not just about those classroom adjustments. So I won't read through all of that, but just gives you an idea of the range of adjustments that are possible for students. And at the bottom there, a quote from the NCCD. They're directly quoting from the Disability Standards. Australian law requires students to make reasonable adjustments for students with disability. So it is a legal requirement. A little bit more for you. The obligations also apply to all types of learning and student participation outside the classroom. So when you're hearing those things like, we're not sure about camp or the swimming carnival, maybe they'll need to just come for part of the time, or maybe they'll just be able to stay home that day, those things need to be questioned. Adjustments support student learning and are developed in consultation. That consultation is so key, and we at Crew get to hear family stories. They ring us and talk to us for support, and often one of those key things that is not happening for parents and for students is that consultation. And it is definitely there in the disability standards saying that consultation is necessary. Teachers make adjustments all the time. I know that as a teacher. And some adjustments assist all the children in the room. So what they're doing for your child might end up assisting many. So they should be made too as soon as possible. Often we hear, oh, you know, by the end of the term we'll get this going, or maybe after the mid-year report we'll sort it out. Adjustments do need to be made quickly. They don't need to be dragged out and waited upon. So, and that's also stated in the disability standards. So you can ask for things to be done timely. Okay, this is a little clip from the official Disability Standards website, so you can have a little look at what they're saying to parents and teachers, what needs to happen.
Everyone is different. Some people are born writers, others are musical, some are artistic, others prefer sport. Sometimes learning new things comes easily, but other times it's hard to keep up. Every student is different. Schools need to make adjustments so every student can learn. These adjustments can be big or quite small. An adjustment for one person can benefit others. But some adjustments are hard to accept. Students with disability are entitled to reasonable adjustments. A reasonable adjustment meets a student's learning needs while balancing everyone's interests. Reasonable adjustments apply to all types of learning, including exams and school camps. In deciding what's reasonable, schools should consult students with disability and their families. Professionals with expertise may be consulted too. Reasonable adjustments are required from enrolment to graduation. Legal exceptions are rare. Students of all abilities have a right to education. With reasonable adjustments, everyone can learn.
Okay, so that takes us on to a slide that we love at Crew because it just speaks 1,000 words. I remember for a long time in schools, and probably in many of them, the first two images would be on display in the school, but not this third one, and we love the third one. Because it's talking about the adjustments, not just be about levelling the playing field or differentiating for each and every student. It's about how can we make adjustments that make it possible to happen for all children. I'll give you a little example, one that I saw recently on one of the Facebook groups, but I thought it was such a fantastic example of explaining this slide. So a parent sort of popped up a post to say, my child's having lots of trouble at assembly. What are some tips that you've got? They've got sensory issues. They're not being able to sit through the assembly. So parents are putting in, my child has got these great headphones. My child has these movement breaks, sensory toys, sitting with peers that can keep them calm. There's all these wonderful ideas. And then somebody put in, well, our school, we actually don't clap at assembly, because this is one of the child's main problems. We all do the raise of hands. And everyone loves it. It's lots of fun. We don't have all that silly clapping that can go on with the older children. And yeah, it's just that way of bringing down the barriers for the children. So it's really having a good look at what we can do from the outset to make this inclusive for everybody. Sometimes there will need to be those individual adjustments, but often what we can do can be for everybody. And another great quote, we try to put our favourite quotes at the bottom, so please note those as well. Linda Graham's a Queensland lecturer in inclusive education. She's got some excellent books and resources. So, what is reasonable to expect? It's quite a lot what you can expect from a school. So this is from the disability standards, what we're going to put through here. So it's reasonable that schools provide access for all. That's not just some, that's every single child. To be welcomed and to be able to enrol in your child at a school of your choice. For your child to participate in regular environments, activities, learning for the same amount of time as the other children without disability in their classroom. To participate in meetings and decision-making processes, to have positive conversations about adjustments. It's very reasonable to expect that your child will be safe. So when you look at this, it's a lot, and that schools are expected to do this. Okay, so why is it that some schools are doing this really well and other schools aren't? What is reasonable, we know, we hear the stories, can vary greatly from school to school. Yes, it does come down to the school's culture, but it also comes down to parent advocacy, and that's why we're here to help you today. The schools that you go to that are inclusive had parents paving the way for those people today. So things can happen, things can change. So we've got the image of the flexible lady there, trying to get schools to be more flexible and seeing the need for them to change their culture. Okay, I'll let Lindy step in now.
So what have parents told us are considered reasonable at their school? Timetable changes, so if a child can't go upstairs, moving all their classes, even at high school level, downstairs. Movement breaks whenever needed, regulation tools, curriculum differentiation for everything, PD for teachers where needed, personal care support, access to AAC, so that's assistive and augmentative communication tools if a child can't verbally get across what they need to, when they need to, and that's access to it whenever they need it, so all the time. Access to assistive tech, checking and actually consulting with the students and the parents on adjustments. So all of those things have been, what we hear all the time, are considered reasonable by their school. This list is the same. So we're also always told by parents that these exact same things are considered unreasonable by their school. So we've got no easy answer, but what we've got to try and do is actually sort of at least give you the information that it is a legal requirement to have reasonable adjustments, but we need to think about what we can control as parents, because it is about pushing and manipulating culture and things that have just been done that way all the time. So what can we control? So having a vision for an ordinary life. So if you've ever been to a Crew workshop, we really bang on about this, having an ordinary vision, like a vision for a good life for your child. And a vision is just simply a statement of what makes a good life. So what I've got written out for Millie, I have to have written out because my other children will never be steered off into other paths of less, whereas Millie will. And so if I'm not articulate and clear that I actually just want the same things for her as I want for my other kids, other people will just choose for us. Clearly outlining goals for your child, embracing your natural authority as their parent. And, you know, I have had many people look at me like I must be in denial. And that's okay, because I would rather them look at me and think I'm in denial and love my child desperately and advocate for her well than just sort of shy away. And look, I shied away for a very long time because of fear of people thinking I was just, losing my mind, the crazy mum. I think my child has so much more ability than she actually does. If I don't believe in her, then who else is going to? Presenting your child well. And that's why we did that at the start, because it happens all the time, and I know you know why it happens. It's something that you're surrounded with all the time. Professionals talk about, have conversations with you about this. School will always have conversations like that. It's all about lists and deficits. We're the only one in the room who's really probably going to turn that around. What you ask for is really important. So the more that we know about what is actually evidence-based inclusive practice, the more likely we are to ask for something that's good and going to lead to good outcomes. We cover this a lot in our workshops, which are full, 5 hours. So that's something really important to increase your knowledge on, and how you ask. So the way that you actually go about having those conversations, there's a lot in the words we use, and being assertive, not aggressive, even though, or being passive and just shying away and being scared of having the conversation, even though we know that it's difficult conversations. We know we're pushing against what is expected. So all of this, come to a full workshop of ours to get more on that. It's really important to think that competency is not a prerequisite. So when inclusion is a practice of believing that a child is ready as they are now and ready for everything, every aspect of school. And you can find these stories in our resources that are free and available up the top room. Oh. That's my son and his school camp a couple of weeks ago. So, I am not the expert on the Australian curriculum. I will hand back to Ainsley.
All right. So a big stumbling block for lots of parents and students is when they're told that the Australian curriculum is really not going to fit their child, that, there's expectations of the curriculum are too high, too hard for them, and their child is given something other. So this is to let you know as parents that the Australian curriculum is actually universally designed. It's designed in a way to include all. When the new Australian curriculum was introduced several years ago, I was in the classroom teaching, and I remember thinking, it's all so vague. There's nothing specific here. I want to know, exactly how many verbs I should be teaching at this year level, or, what should I be doing to assess a child here? Well, I need to get them to write an assignment or do a written test. None of that's stated in the Australian curriculum for a reason, because it's supposed to be flexible for teachers so that they can include a diverse range of learners in those lessons. So do expect that your child will be delivered quality education and they will be part of the Australian curriculum. So it is designed in that way. And if you want to know more about it, if you want to do more digging, there's an excellent website that's designed for teachers, but because the person that designed it knows universal design well, she has designed it in a way that everyone can really get in there and read the information about the Australian curriculum. It's called schoolinclusion.com, and it's by a Queensland educator that specialises in inclusive education and others that she's gathered around her. So there's a three-dimensional design. I won't talk too much more, but that means all that literacy and numeracy that often our children are taken out to do really can be brought back into the classroom, and they can do a lot of that focused learning at their levels within their regular classrooms as well. It just takes a teacher to know that Australian curriculum well. And sometimes it might be getting the teachers to have a little look more at what is possible. Very important that we highlight to educators that they need to have a look at things from the outset. So having a look at how are they presenting the language of their instruction and their tools in the classroom. For what they can do for children with disability is often best for all, as we've stated. So that's looking at is the language they're presenting in spoken language accessible? Is a written language instruction accessible? Visual supports provided on the documents that they're using and throughout the classroom. Are they explaining and pre-teaching that vocabulary that's key to the topics that they're working through? Are they providing appropriate scaffolding for their students? So I've got some examples here. This Universal Design Principles checklist is excellent. If you go on to our CRU classroom learning page in the FIFI section, and we can give you more information about that later today, you will find that Design Principles checklist. It's a little bit hard to search for on the net, but it's excellent. And if you work in a workplace where you're producing documents, great for you to go to that too, because you can make your work documents more accessible for other people as well. These are some examples of activity sheets that are provided to all students in a classroom, which make it accessible for all children, not just for that child with disability. And assistive technology, as mentioned by Caroline Hay earlier on, is very key now, and we've got it there to use. So let's use it. And we do have free tools, assistive technology tools. My other job before I worked for CRU, that was my specialty area, assistive technology. So if you ever do have questions, feel welcome to ring CRU, and I can hopefully steer you in the right direction. This document's good to go to as well. There's one for laptops and one for iPads. Okay, I think I'm heading back over to Lindy.
Just briefly, because this is actually an example from Millie's Year 6 science. So Caroline Hay was Millie's Year 6 teacher, and she was just gold after some really rough years. So, and this was just an example of a science exam that Caroline made, and it's just because she knows what she's assessing. She knows what she needs Millie to demonstrate, and then she knows what Millie can do. So Millie could work very well with multiple choice and match up the answers and that sort of thing. So she was very successful engaging in assessments that way. Now we've put this in too because we get a lot of stories of must-have teacher aid support on a child, particularly for safety. So safety for themselves, safety for others, and particularly in things that might, and like, I can't imagine many classes more unsafe than industrial tech and design. So we've put this one up here. So in Year 10, you know, they've got all sorts of saws and things. You could really, really do some damage to yourself or others. And this is a school that has planned their whole, you know, term or semester out week by week for every lesson. And this is all about the support for the child, and it's all about peer support. So it's all very small, of course, but one of the lines says that the focus is if there's explicit teaching needing to be done, the teacher does the teaching, not the teacher aid. The teacher aid supports the rest of the class, and the teacher works with the student with a disability. And then for all of the other lessons, or all the other lesson time, they've actually named, and of course we've blacked that out, but named 3 students that work well with that child likes and considers friends of theirs, and they are to be the ones to be assigned each week to be working in the group or on the same project or whatever. So, you know, that's a really good example of what can be done.
Okay, so this is an example here too of senior English, where it shows a little bit of an example of a student who is in year 11 or 12 but is being assessed at year 4 level. And, you know, it's not a complicated process that we're asking teachers to go through. And this section of the curriculum here just shows that, you know, they've just got this quick photocopy they've gone through to make sure that they're working towards these areas of the curriculum for the child, but they're working on the content that the peers are working through. So often we find year 11 and 12s are left hanging because there's, you know, everything seems to end at year 10, but it's very possible, as I think we saw with Rhonda Farragher and her daughter today, for children to be right in their learning quality education right through year 11 and 12. So using audio books was an example throughout this one, and yeah, so we'll let you have a little bit more of a look with the PDF so you can have a look through them there. So, as mentioned before by Carolyn, there are so many great resources now available to teachers. The internet is a godsend. These are just some examples that we love at Crew. We've gotten to interact with a lady called Dr. Paula Kluth, an expert in inclusion from the US. And yeah, just some of her ideas which bring creativity to the classroom for all students. Excellent tips there from her. And we're going to sort of just briefly talk about things outside the curriculum and adjustments, reasonable adjustments that can be made there. So this is an example of a personalised learning zones for a student. And I love this little quote that was shared recently. A child should not have to earn sensory breaks. The day that they need them most is the day they are least likely to earn them. So often we get stories in a Crew of schools not being prepared to help with personal support, especially around toileting. So we wanted to share these photos of what is possible. So we'll have some people ring saying, my school's asking me to come in several times a day to assist with toileting my child. They're not going to train staff or provide appropriate facilities. Then down the road, another school, we've got staff being trained, we've got specialised toilets being upgraded and built so that 2 adults can be in there assisting the child, and the child can have a healthy and positive experience of going to the toilet. So again, it comes down to that school culture and that positive advocacy, but it's just to let you know that so much is possible and schools do this. Now this is my young man. I don't have time today to go through our whole story, but we've been through every setting: special, Catholic, independent, and state schools and SEPs. He's now right in there at his high school, included in every lesson with his same-aged peers. It's taken me a long learning journey that Crew's taken me on, and he's taken me on, but I have a different boy today. And a lot of the reason for where he is at today is because of the peer connection. So never underestimate the possibilities of peer connection and peer teaching. So that's where I've seen him move right ahead. So peer connection, peer support, peer teaching have been key to Will's growth in all areas and helping him return to a happy and inclusive life. So having that teacher aide always by their side, as we've heard, is not best practice. As much as we can build in those peer supports. And the parents that I've interacted with the last couple of years have said, wow, how much it's helped their kids and how much it's brought them along and how it's going to help them into their futures as well. There's a little video here of him skipping. I don't know if it'll play for me. I'll give it a go. Might just go to the next slide.
Ready?
You can see his peers cheering him on. He's on the orange. So you can hear the peers in the background. I haven't got permission off everybody yet to show all their kids' faces. This is this wonderful friend Spencer, his best mate. But Will's done years and years of OT. We never thought he could skip. And in his last year of primary school, the kids got behind him and made it happen. So that peer connection is really possible. Will's got lots of issues with dyspraxia and he's on the autism spectrum. So, yeah. So here are some more beautiful examples. These are from, I think, mainly from our Building Belonging book. So you can read more stories in depth there. And school life is more than academics, so those are over in the main room for free for you to take. Excellent resources, but this is the story of, I'm going to have my little blank here. It is Claire, isn't it? And she's at her school, I think it was a talent quest, and she's got a communication partner and using her AAC to display and be part of her school talent quest. This is Lindy's daughter Millie, several years ago, being a chapel steward, and the supports that were put in place for her to do something that she really wanted to do and be a real quality part of her school community. And this is our senior consultant Lisa's son. He's now 26, but this is back in the day of high school where he wanted to be on the school writing team, and the supports are put in place so he could do that. All right, I think we're almost getting to the end. We've done pretty well. So if you want to find more adjustment ideas, you can head along first to our Crew webpage, and if you go to Inclusive Education, it'll take you to our FIFI resources pages. And specifically for today would be the Classroom Learning tab, so have a look for that. And you'll find links to all of these key documents there. So that's a picture of our Classroom Learning page there on the left. Is the Adjustment Inclusive? That is an excellent book because so much of what we see is integration still and not full inclusion. So that gives you examples and little questions to guide you on to whether or not what school's doing is truly inclusive. The NCCD has so many good resources. We think it's quite underutilised by parents. There are excellent podcasts there where teachers, experts talk about what are the type of adjustments that are appropriate for children with different difficulties in the classrooms. So very good to have those on hand when you're sort of finding things are running dry for your child and you want some new ideas. The Education Queensland, our project is funded by Education Queensland. Crew is very independent in our thinking and what we tell people, but it's great that they're behind what we do. So there are great vignettes, which are little videos of schools doing this. I think most of them are okay on the Ed Queensland website, so you can head there and have a little look for some examples of good inclusion happening in our Queensland state schools. And the QCAA, they're getting friendlier and better with what they do all the time. They've got some excellent information there on personalised learning adjustments as well that can happen in Queensland schools. Okay, I think that's me too, isn't it, Lindy? So, what do we want to leave you with today? Some essential advocacy tips. Lead with vision and gifts, not problems. I just go into school now with a collage of photos when I go along to a meeting with school, not the big portfolio of assessments. Plan, document what you want and anticipate changes. So, as you head along to meetings, getting ready for them, make sure you document what's said and what's promised, sending a little positive follow-up email after a meeting to make sure that things are happening. We do whole workshops on all that, so come along and you'll find out more. Be careful what you ask for, learn about inclusive practices. I think Lindy alluded to that before. Sometimes we, as parents, also slip back to that more medical model of thinking our children need much more. We've got to keep those expectations high and keep thinking about what's inclusive, what's going to get them right in there with their peers, learning alongside them. Share knowledge of your child in a warm, non-confrontational but assertive way. Yeah. Finding resources. I know we've tried to load you up with much today, but really, knowing all the nitty-gritty is not your job. It's good to know it, good to try and steer school in some positive directions, but it's not your job to know all the nitty-gritties of the curriculum and all the adjustments that are possible. And know that it's never too late. My son, we didn't really get him up and going with inclusion until he was in year 6. It's never too late. We talk to people who are in their 60s. They've moved from group home situations into independent living. Of course, it's always better to do it early on, But if your child's in high school or in another situation, don't think that you've missed the boat. Okay, so how do you connect with other parents? We often hear people say, oh, I just got nobody else in my community that seems to be thinking the way I am. QCIE connects with CREW. They're a peer support network. There are coffee mornings and dinners held all around Queensland now, and we're hoping to grow it even further. Lindy and I have another hat, and we do sort of step over into roles in QCIE too as parents. So this is the Inclusive Education brochure. You'll find that's from QCIE. The Queensland Collective for Inclusive Education is what QCIE stands for. You'll find brochures for them over on the main table as well as our Term 1 flyer of events and phone numbers for people in your local area to connect with. And they have a website with resources available. There's 2 Facebook groups, a public one and a closed one, where parents share what they're going through. Sometimes we'll pop up, there's an excellent Bob Jackson document that's just gone up there today, which is great. So well worth joining the closed Facebook group as well. There's online events too, for those people who can't get out to lunches and dinners. Okay, I think I've spoken a fair bit about our resources. We've alluded to the fact that we do workshops for families. They're funded by the government. They're free for you to come to. We have beautiful lunches that we provide, and we find everyone walks away going, wow, we've got some good stuff to go ahead with back to school now. So well worth coming along to our workshops. We've got flyers over at the main table again with dates of when they're happening and places. We do individual consultations, so if you need to talk one-on-one with somebody, you can ring, and it will be Lindy, myself or Lisa you can talk to about some issues you might be facing, and we'll work through those with you. And we work on peer support development. We've got lots of webinars now and online learning on our website, especially during COVID. We did lots of little online workshops you can go to on certain topics, so they're worth checking out as well. Okay, so I'm going to be putting this one up on the educators page too. We're doing educators session later today, which we're excited about. Equity is hearing somebody's voice about what they need and providing them with it. And I think that's us for today. Did we run all right to time? I'm hoping we did. So now we've got some time. Should we have a little bit of time for questions and answers? Would that be, yeah. Was that a chat question? Yep. Yeah, I think every one of our resources is available as a digital version. We've got great little, I'll say team, but mainly a person at work who makes all that happen. So yes, if you go onto our FIFI classroom learning page in particular, but on the other pages too.
We sent through to Lindsay a PDF, which is a full list with active links of for all the people at home to all of our digital copies. Yeah.
Did everyone hear that question?
We've filled up all your heads, have we? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I get confused about what my child should be accessing. So she's in grade 2. So is it okay for her to be accessing a lower level of the curriculum as long as she's doing as long as it appears that she's doing the same sort of topics and, you know, following whatever the rest of the class is doing?
So the main goal, first up, is to start with what the year level curriculum is, and then schools are supposed to go through quite a process before they modify or adjust the curriculum for that child to a different year level. So yes, it can happen, but as you said, if the child is needing to be assessed and access the curriculum, say they're in year 2 but they've got prep level literacy skills and they're finding it really hard to be able to assess them at that level, that's when they do map back. So the Australian curriculum is very good at being able to do that. They can go through, right, this is what we're learning in science in year 2, and the topics pretty much will stay the same throughout. They can map it back to that prep level and have a look at how they could assess them there. But yeah, it's always best to start at the age group because there's long-term implications, as we know, of having a child assessed and reported at that lower level. But yeah, sometimes it's very necessary. But yeah, we've got to make sure that that's all done properly. Hope that answered it. But yeah, call us if you need to know
Just
more.
when we're asking a question, if you can use the mic so that the people online can hear.
I've just got a question in relation to individual support plans,
Mm-hmm.
because they used to be just quite vague, but now they have to be based on the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that in lots of detail, but I can find out more for you. So we're finding schools that are doing all sorts of different things still. But yeah, are you talking about how you need much more than just a curriculum information there? You'd like to see information around social support and...
Filling in their week in school, but it's more around, they've got every single thing on that plan now has to reflect the Queensland curriculum or Australian curriculum.
Yeah, and you're finding that's
It's better, yeah.
it's better. That's good. Well, that is good that that's happening. But at the same time too, I guess we've got to keep looking out for, what's happening with those social emotional connections and yeah. But very good. If we can get that curriculum inclusion happening, that helps the child's general inclusion so much more too, because they're out there, the kids will be talking about things at playtime that they learned at school or back at home. So yeah, curriculum inclusion is really key.
And look, I just wanted to say, like as a parent, if you've got plans that everyone actually understands, they're, authentically involving the student and the family and everyone knows what's expected and it's actually delivered, it's wonderful. It's fantastic, But we certainly see, and I've certainly experienced times where you have a very thick wad of paper and no one really is ever looking at it or doing anything with it and probably isn't really actually being applied or probably even helpful. So, it's all about, difference from each school. But yeah, you would hope that there is good clarification and making sure that you can keep coming back to those in review and that sort of thing, and making sure that they're working. Yeah.
You mentioned quite a lot about reasonable adjustments with regard to curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we stand with adjustments with regard to behaviour
Mm-hmm.
and the supports that children need with behaviour, but also when there's an argument whether the behaviours are due to a disability or other factors?
Yeah. I do know, and we don't work within the department, but we do know that there's a lot of work that is going on and there's still a lot of confusion within schools around the behaviour. So I know for my son that a lot of adjustments are put in place ready to make sure that he has a positive and good day. And a lot of those adjustments are the teachers adjusting for him, not him having to do the adjustments, but also around him needing those, breaks, them looking out for the signs that it's time for him to move and break. So again, it unfortunately comes down to school culture and parent advocacy, but there's also work that we know that's happening within to improve it, because people are aware that schools have really got to move ahead with that area of behaviour. But yeah, a lot is possible, and I come from
it seems like there's like a certain range of behaviours which are quite common in children with Down
Mhm.
syndrome that can appear like the child is just being naughty.
Mm-hmm.
When you speak to other parents of children with Down syndrome, these behaviours are actually really common
Mm-hmm.
for our children. And it's like, where's that crossover there around them making that reasonable adjustment?
Well, first of all, I think it always comes back to, and I certainly agree there are patterns and that sort of thing, similarities. It's always going to come back to why is this particular thing happening? What can we do to prevent it? And always understanding that behaviour is actually an expression of emotion or feeling. And when it starts getting labelled as behaviour or, incidents, then the conversation is often going away from the human being who's at the centre of it, which always really concerns us because they're children, and they're children who are disadvantaged compared to their peers. So we actually have a whole section on friendships and belonging, and we've put, behaviour under that, because it's not a term we like to to use, but it is something that obviously is out there. So, and you'll see a lot of what we think about that. We're actually about to release a case study video on a school, one child, different year levels, so different teachers, very different experiences. Try and sort of draw out what it really takes to be able to include a child who does have those challenges.
Thank you so much today. We are going to run out of time on this session. If people do have any further questions, we can collate those at the end and try and get some sort of response, or grab Lindy or Ainsley perhaps in a break coming up, if that's possible. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us. I was just going to mention, if you're looking for a quick go-to when your mind's feeling a bit overwhelmed, our fact sheets are excellent as well, and you'll find copies of those in folders up at the table. Thank you, everybody.